So once again, I want to welcome Dr. Amin Tarzi, Director of Middle Eastern Studies at U.S. Marine Corps University in Quantico, Virginia.
Thank you very much. And again, Uzi, it's very good to see you. I think our last meeting was a dinner, which I never forget because stuff we talked about personal, not missiles. I still have those in my head, and I thank you for that. The wise words that you gave me, which I've still got. You may not know, but it has affected me much more than you think. In a very good way.
I don't remember what I said.
Well, they were good. The first thing I want to say is I would have put this on the wall, but I'll say I am speaking as myself, as a researcher. I do work for the Defense Department of the United States, but what I say here does not necessarily reflect the views of the United States Marine Corps or any other United States government agencies. I'm talking as a researcher. That's important because we can have an open discussion, and I'm not going to give you our foreign policy line per se. You can read that many places, but we are here to have a discussion. I have an outline on the topic that we talked about, and I will give you a little bit of a history about Iran's maritime background, the structure and doctrine currently, tactics and posture. Again, I will be very brief on these so we can have a question. A little bit of a geographical information, and then the changing maritime environment as a whole, again in the regions that we just talked about. For my department that I lead, right now the four bodies of water that is very much in focus is the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and Eastern Mediterranean. That arc is what we really look at. The Black Sea is there, but not really. The Navy, our Navy is taking care of that. So I'm kind of looking at that arc of fantastic calmness. And then I will look at a little bit at what we in the US Navy talk the competition, conflict spectrum, and what Iran plays in that, what role Iran plays therein. And then a couple of words about Iran's hegemonic activities, which will bring us also to what's happening in Saudi Arabia. And then we can just have a question and comment. I personally don't mind if you want to ask something in the middle, but I leave that to my host here to whether you want to talk about it or not. A little bit of background, again, I have a command and control of Iran, a chart here, but I can tell you in the case of Iran, and I'm sure most of you know here, the elected official, the president of Iran, is not the supreme commander of the armed forces. It is rather the supreme leader, which in the case right now is Ayatollah Khamenei. And the structure of armed forces, so directly under Khamenei, you have the Armed Forces General Staff, which is separated in two different commands. One is what people call regular forces, or Artesh. Artesh simply means army in Persian, nothing more. And underneath that, you have a Navy, a ground forces, an Air Force, and an Air Defense Force. So it's important that Air Defense is actually a separate force because the way they look at their defensive measures is that they're worried about aerial attack, whether it is by planes or by drones or missiles from the United States or Israel or whatever. So that they're very concentrated on that. Then there is, of course, the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, or some people call them revolutionary. That's not actually the name. In Persian, it stands for Islamic Revolution Guard Corps. They have their own navy. They have ground forces. They have something else which is called the Aerospace Force. This is where the strategic weapons are kept. The Artesh, or the regular army, doesn't have any long-range missiles. The longest-range missile they have is what they call Zalzal 110, which basically, again, I have a missile expert here, but it's Frog, which was a Russian, basically rail-launched missile of about 70 kilometers. This is 110 to 150 kilometer range. That's it. Everything else you see, with the missiles, the drones, they're all under the IRGC and not on the regular forces. They also have a component called the Quds Force. We are sitting in Quds, so it's called Jerusalem. By technical name, that idea is that one day they will come and free Jerusalem. And then they have a organization called the Basij Oppressed. Basij in Persian means mobilization. We don't know how many Besieged are there. Numbers go between 3 million to 13 million. Besieged is not something that it is actually, some are core Besieged members, others are people who are the government's ears and eyes, the government's destructive force inside the country, where the Quds force is the destructive force outside the country. For example, I always say, let us say we are all teachers of history in high school level. And we are sitting here talking about the curriculum. At least one of us is a Besieged. Even if it is not, everybody else here thinks one of us is a Besieged. And that's how the government keeps an eye. Yes, sir.
The siege is under the IRGC?
Yes, sir. It's directly under the IRGC. So that is how they do it. And if you, those of you follow Iran closely, in 2009, where actually they had a revolution or uprising bigger than any of the Arab, so-called Arab Springs, the Besieged are the ones who are killing people, raping people, and letting them go back home. I mean, they literally rape boys and girls and send them back home. They didn't kill them. And then Khamenei later on actually arrested the head of the prison. He said he did a bad thing. But the idea was this use of terror. I call this use of terror. You terrorize the people. Okay, you go against us, that's what's going to happen to you, your sons, your daughters. Yes, the head of prison went to jail. Khamenei said, oh, I didn't hear about that, that was bad. But he didn't deny it. But that's a whole different issue we can discuss. And then you have the IRGC's intelligence organization. One other word that I want to say, that the supreme leader, while he's the commander of all armed forces, he has a direct, when I say direct, I mean direct command and to two organizations. One is the Quds forces and one is the IRGC intelligence organization. There is no in between. For example, in our country, United States, the President of the United States, while he is the Commander-in-Chief, or she, if one day we have one that, there is a chain of command. The head of, let's say, the Delta Force, if you say the Delta Force is one of our special forces, that cannot call the President and say, hey, sir, what am I going to do? But this is exactly how the relationship is. So Qasem Soleimani, who is the head of the Quds forces, literally can call directly, and this is not something personal. This is actually structural. He has a direct line to Khamenei. And this is very crucial, because here you have an unelected official who is there basically at the behest of the Messiah for the Iranian, for the Shias, has a direct line to the two organizations. And keep that in mind. So both the intelligence of the IRGC and the Quds forces are directly controlled, not by the Minister of the Defense or the structure of the armed forces, but directly by the person or the office of the Supreme Leader. So I leave that at the structure. Going back now to the, so I made a distinction between two navies. Now I'm talking about the regular. When I say regular navy, I mean the regular navy, and then the IRGC is the other one. The regular navy of Iran has its roots, believe it or not, all the way to the Achaemenid Empire. Iran, even in the days of the empire, was not really a naval force. Has been always a ground force. Even in the heydays when they were a large empire, the second largest contiguous land empire ever in the history of humankind. But forgetting about that time, what you have today is a continuation of the imperial navy of Reza Shah Pahlavi, who was ousted in 1979. At the time, until 79, February 79, it was the largest navy in the Middle East. It was mainly equipped by the American equipment, but it also had French, Dutch, and Israeli, believe it or not, equipment here and there. Not so overtly, but they did. What actions did it do? The Shah had a lot of ambitions, but the actions, the specific actions, was taking in 1971 the island of Abu Musa and the two islands of Tunis, which when Britain left Persian Gulf, they actually went and occupied it. They still have them, which the United Arab Emirates asked for those of them. Ambitions were very, very great. The Shah wanted what we call in America, a blue water navy, even then. He never got to that. Their main force was in the Persian Gulf. The only time they went out of the Persian Gulf for offensive measures was when they came in to help the Sultanate of Oman against a communist uprising. in Darfur. Sorry, not like between Yemen and Oman. Now I jump into the modern day. When the regime changed into the Islamic Republic, the Navy was almost regarded as a auxiliary power. Nobody really cared much about it. The Khamenei was very reluctant to give them power, first because they were very much part of the imperial system, and also purging them, he didn't feel too bad about them because he didn't need them inside the country. So the top leadership was purged and the Navy became almost as I said, an auxiliary force. There was no effort to bring the Navy up. However, they gained legitimacy in 1982. In 1982, during the Iran-Iraq War, as all of you know, in September 1980, Iraq invades Iraq. And the first 2 years, Iraq has the upper hand. There's an operation that anybody who's a student of naval operations, I urge them to look at. It's called Operation Murvarid, which in Persian means the pearl. It's launched November 1982. It's a very short operation, but it is an operation mainly launched by the Iranian Navy, even though there's very little of it left. The weapons were there. Using the weapons that the United States and others had given them, they launched an operation on Mina al-Bakr, which was Iraq's largest naval and air base. Not largest air base, but largest naval base and a very important air base. And they basically decapitate the Iraqi Navy and much of their planes.
What is the name of that base?
Mina al-Bakr, still there. It's right, if you look at the map of Iraq, it's very close to Basra in the south. It's a surprise operation, it is effective. And in Iran, they didn't initially make a lot of fuss about it because it was mainly these people who were American trained who took part in that. However, that changes part of the whole trend of war. From 82 onwards, Iran has the upper hand. Everybody looks at these waves of humans in the IRGC running these martyrdom, as they called it, waves. Those are very important. However, this, as far as militarily and direct hit, this operation where Walid is crucial. And we are getting more and more information about it and seeing what had happened. So that gives the Navy a little bit more legitimacy, that the Navy actually could be used in more than just defensive measures inside control, safeguarding Iran's maritime domain, which is the 24 kilometers. Sorry. However, it is still subordinate to the IRGC Navy until the end of the Iraq War. It is still competing for funds and equipment. And then at 2007, a reorganization starts. It goes from 2007 to 2017. 10 years. The entire Iranian Navy goes through a very massive, very systematic reorganization. Again, I'm sure there are people in your government who look at that. What you see today around the world with the Iranian Navy, it's part of that change of behavior. And new leadership comes in 2017. Again, I have their pictures, but names are not that important here. Now, the revolution, the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps Navy. They are established in 1983. Again, look at the date. 82 is Murvari. A year later, not even a year later, they are established, and the headquarters is set up a bit later, not inside Iran proper. It's actually set up and still there on Farsi Island. It's offshore headquarters. Right there, symbolically they're telling them that the IRGC Navy is not for the defense of the Iranian motherland, if you would, but rather for exploitation of this ideology and the hegemonic, if you would, ideas. Even today, the headquarters of IRGC sits on Farsi Island, which is a good thing to do.
IRGC or IRGC Navy?
IRGC Navy, just the Navy. Sorry, I'm only talking about Navy right now. Basically, the IRGC Navy's mission is the same as the mission of the IRGC per se, which is defense of the revolution first, and perhaps the state second. This is key. It's the defense of the revolution. The name is Islamic Revolution Guard Corps. Not revolutionary. Well, New York Times, everybody, even our military, that's important. They're not a revolutionary force that are moving. They're a force that already is looking at something that's already happened in 12 February 1979. They have what I call, this in my own terminology, an offensive defense tactics during Iran-Iraq war. For example, in the tanker wars, which is 87, 88, they start bombing, mining ships. So the US goes ahead, and this is important why I say that, because it may actually happen or is happening as we speak. So I'm a baseball fan. Those of you who know the American New York Yankees, there was a great Yankee, Yogi Berra, who said it's deja vu all over again. For me, I was a Marine during those times, so I can kind of say, okay, this is not happening again, people. I'm just too old to do those things anymore. So we had something called the Operation Earnest Will, where we reflagged, the United States reflagged ships of initially Kuwait, but also later on some other countries in the Gulf. And then in July 1987, they hit what was called the USS Bridgeton. Bridgeton was actually not an American ship, it was called Al-Rika, it was a Kuwaiti ship. And that ship's Ronald Reagan's whole idea about what to do. Again, if you want to look at what's happening today, it was that hit on Al-Rika which actually had on it the USS Bridgeton, because it was a US flagged ship, even though it was a few months ago, it was called Raqqa. It shifts the paradigm, and for the Iranians, actually, the Hossein Mousavi, which at that time was the Prime Minister, he said, and I quote, "This was an irreparable blow to American political and military prestige." If it sounds familiar with today, almost same words. And Mousavi, by the way, is supposed to be this very nice guy that everybody supports and say, look, this is a liberal guy. He's not a liberal. There are no liberals in the Iranian regime. That's what I believe. There are no such things, honestly. That's some people who want to know it. That's great, fantastic. And then there's another operation which was classified. Now we can talk about it because parts of it has become declassified. It's called Operation Praying Mantis. The United States launched Praying Mantis in April 1988. Praying Mantis basically is an operation to hit a couple of Iranian oil platforms and IRGC navies, pretty much dismantle a lot of their powers. It is one of the most successful operations, in my view. There was American loss of life. Of course, it changes Iran's behavior. Some people even say that Operation Praying Mantis is one of the reasons Khomeini, the predecessor, signed the peace deal in the same year, actually, with Iraq, because he said, okay, this is, because we actually, the United States landed on Iranian soil. That's something a lot of people don't talk about, but it happened. The details of this operation are still not up in public, specific details. But it was a very, very small, but very effective operation. What Operation Praying Mantis does is shows Iran's vulnerabilities and how to use a smaller navy to play with a much, much larger navy like the United States. And that is where, if you see from that time on, the whole transformation, which now basically became solid in 2017, occurs. In my view, again, can I prove that? I don't think I can, but I'm pretty confident on it, that the Praying Mantis is the nexus or the rationale, the raison d'etre of Iranian Navy becoming what it has become. And they get new ships and boats, I would say, smaller boats. One of the main things is to make the Navy much smaller boats, not have specific targets. What they do is right now, one of their tactics, I don't know if the Iranians were directly involved or not, but when they hit one of our ships in Aden, actually in Yemen, with a small boat, to basically come in and swarm a US vessel. And now they have, of course, issues with, now they have the aerial power to do the same thing. So that's basically what changes. I'll leave the historical thought. The only thing I'll tell you is if you look at the area of responsibility, after 2017, there's a new definitive distribution of area of responsibility. The Persian Gulf, right up to the closest point where Oman meets Iran, it becomes 100% the responsibility of the IRGC. The same, between Bandar Abbas to the outside of the Gulf of Oman, where they actually hit a couple of ships a while ago. Yes, well, they did it, but at least we think they did it. The commercial ships, that is a joint responsibility. Then the rest of the oceans become the responsibility of the Iranian regular Navy.
The regular Navy is under the Apache.
Yes, yes, sir, absolutely. So that's the idea. And then in the Caspian Sea, what they have in the Caspian, the Iranians claim basically a triangle like this into the Caspian. It's not accepted by anybody else, and Russia and Iran have never accepted whether it's even a lake or a sea, and we leave that for now, and it makes a big difference whether the Caspian is a lake or a sea, but that also is in the hands of the Iranian regular Navy. So again, when you look at the importance, the IRGC for Iran, still the Persian Gulf is the most important playground. Just for your information, the choke points of the world. Today, still 19% of the entire global energy goes through the Persian Gulf. Still number one by far. Well, not by far. Number two is the Straits of Malacca to 16%. And then after that, if you want, 5.5% is the Suez Canal, 4.8% is Bab al-Mandab in Yemen, 5.8% Cape of Good Hope, 2.4% Turkish Straits, and 3.3%.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes, sir, please.
On the choke points. The reality is that a lot of the oil passing through Bab al-Mandab or wherever is also passing through the Straits of Malacca. So actually, we shouldn't be talking in terms of percentages, we should be talking in terms of tonnages.
Yes, sir. Yes, I understand what you're saying. But when they look at it, this is from the U.S. Department of Energy, when they look at it, they look at specific tonnage going through, percentage going through each of those. All of them are located. I mean, if you cannot go to the Suez Canal, especially south, unless you go through Bab al-Mandab. If not, you're stuck unless you go through a pipeline. Egypt has a pipeline, but they're all interrelated. Most of them, not so much Cape of Good Hope, but the rest of them are all interrelated.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But you can have the same tanker going through 2 or 3 different choke points during a single voyage. So actually, there's tonnages of these tankers that matter.
More important. Okay. Thank you. Now, ambitions and capabilities. What has the Iranian Navy done beyond the Persian Gulf in the Arabian Sea? Coming back to Mediterranean, in 2011 they visit Latakia for the first time. This was partially thanks to Mr. Morsi, former dead now president of Egypt. He allowed them to go through the Suez Canal. The Yemen crisis, but also importantly, the change in Egypt has prevented that. That has never happened. These are things that we don't talk about Egypt. A lot of people, at least I know your relationship with Egypt is very good. In the US there are some issues. I always say, look, it's a lot more than meets the whether Mr. Sisi is Democrat or not. There is a lot of issues that are happening. So then what they did was they decided that they have to go and make bases there. They started an arrangement with Eritrea, Djibouti, and Sudan. In Djibouti, they never made landfall. By the way, I don't know if you know or not, 8 countries have bases in Djibouti right now. 8. Used to be only a friendship. 8 countries have military bases in Djibouti, naval military bases. That includes China's first base since a long time ago, and Japan's first base since World War II. We have one, thanks to the French, so 8 of them. If you want to know which ones are there, I'll tell you. But China and Japan are both there. Thankfully, the Iranians were walled off. The Russians, the US actually, I have to say, prevented that. The Chinese got in there because the Chinese actually came in from the back door because they had part of the anti-piracy coalition, although they were not under command, but they were outside of it, and they snuck in through that system. Then they tried to, of the three countries I mentioned, the one that they got closest to the Iranians then was Sudan. The Sudan, the only reason that was terminated was because of Saudi Arabia. They basically, Saudis paid money and said they would prevent more money coming from Sudan if they didn't kick the Iranians out. So there's a lot of little games going on there. Then they decided in 2016 to have a flotilla, the Iranian name, go from Atlantic, go around South Africa, come into Syria. They're trying very hard to get here. Through the South Africa, through the Straits of Gibraltar. Just to tell you, very simple, so I don't take time, it was a fiasco. The flotilla actually broke down before it made close to Durban. As a humanitarian gesture, the South Africans actually pulled it into shore, kept it there for several months. They went back. So the Iranian Navy still is not a blue water navy. However,
they're not looking east at all?
They have gone east. They have gone to Shanghai. They have gone out that way. But it's a very different way to go that way or come into Atlantic and make that arc. You need a very you need much different equipment to make that journey down to South Africa.
Is there any competition between the two Iranian navies?
I would say since 2017, not as much, because now you have a marriage, meaning that people who are IRGC are now serving there and vice versa. There's always more money in the IRGC. It's not as much as in the Army, as I told you, when it comes to aerospace, the other side doesn't even have, the regular Navy doesn't even have aerospace. When it comes to defense, missile defense, most of it is in the hands of the IRGC. Navy this is a good question, sir. I think in the Navy is where you see the most seamless cooperation.
Well, I'm concerned about the issue of the fact that the RCG is a financial institution as well.
Yes, sir. Very, very, very big financial institution.
So how does that fit into this?
Okay, there are people who say that the Navy is actually being used for smuggling, which could be. Look at Yemen. I mean, weapons in Yemen don't show up from nowhere. They're not coming by land, but they have to go to Saudi Arabia, so they're coming by sea. There's a lot of, also Iran has a very large fleet of commercial ships. Again, they have to hug the shore, going back to the question about, they can't really go, they can go east, they can go around, they can't go into the open seas. They don't have that capability yet. And yet it's important because they're trying very hard to get to that point. Now, 2017, Khanzadi, who's now the current leader, said that he promised to, quote unquote, visit one of the friendly states in South America and the Gulf of Mexico. That friendly country is Nicaragua. I can tell you which one he's going to go to. However, so far, thankfully, they haven't showed up in there. Now, I shift to I give you now more of a U.S. Military parlance, if we would. If you look at the decades following the Cold War, the maritime domain is pretty much uncontested with the United States leading. So between 1991 to 2001, our Navy it has almost full command of the seas. In today's multipolar era, there's an increasing competition among states for sea control, sea lanes of communication, access to global market, and diplomatic partnerships. Additionally, the hyper-connected world and the spread of technologies to state, non-state, and hybrid actors have increased the variety of coercive power available to disrupt maritime transit or wage guerrilla warfare at sea. And here I stop. When you look at what's happening today, just since June, I'm not even talking about, I'm not going back to the BC eras. I'm talking about June, just a few months. All of that is happening. And this word hybrid actor, I don't know if there's a word here in Israel that talking about as a non-state hybrid, we need to find, and this is something that I'm hoping that we learn, in any place I go, what to call these. I mean, here ships are being hit. Ships are being detained, and these are not ships from like Wagga Wagga. These are British ships with the British flag being taken off and the oil is being taken away. Nobody does anything. And the question is, what are these state, are these non-state, are these hybrid, are these what? And the important thing is, because most of us here, those of you who are into politics and government, we have studied international relations, which is predicated on what? On states. We all, whether we like it or not, we think states are holy. We work to
Nelson called it privateers. Nelson called it privateers. It's not a pirate, it's a privateer, because it's a pirate who has a license to be a pirate.
That's another word for it, but they are in reality, but some of them are state-sponsored.
Yes,
Privateer.
they're proxies.
They're proxies, yes. Iran does a great job with
I
proxies.
think that we're all accustomed to the idea of non-state actors that are proxies for nation states.
But sir, I'm not arguing against you. All I'm saying is, look, there's a country called Republic of Somaliland, with which right now a state country called the United Arab Emirates has a relationship. They have a base there, and a European country, which I'm not named just because it's being recorded, a very important European country has an unofficial base there. Republic of Somaliland does not exist, meaning no country in the world has an embassy there. They have a flag. They have had more independence and more security in any part of Somalia since 1991. The Shabab, the Islamist group, is not operational there. So what are they? Are they a state? Are they non-state? Because in the United Nations there's one Somali flag, and apparently all of it is Somalia. Well, Somalia can't even come close to that, because there's in the middle there's an even more opaque little place. So these places in 21st century, some of them larger than your country, are there. They are becoming magnets for everything. Look at the Houthis. They don't govern, but yet they're receiving arms from Iran, and they claim to have hit Saudi Arabia. I don't think they did, but they.
The Iranians allowed them to open an embassy, I think.
Yes. So these are piracy. I hear your words, and proxies, but they're becoming more the reality than the norm. And we, those of us who studied IR in the past century, I was a student in 2000, in the years 1990s, whatever. We have to actually find new terms to even understand it, because when we talk, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's just becoming more difficult.
So let's call them a semi-state for the sake of argument.
Semi-state, maybe, yeah. So again, and then the range of modern sensors and weaponry also has extended, reach hundreds of kilometers beyond, both landward and seaward, blurring the distinction between sea-based and land-based operations and assets. And this is key for us, for me in the Marine Corps. They used to have sea-based and land-based. Today, there are theories, again, we have a man who knows way more than I do on these. Some people are claiming that some of these missiles that hit Saudi Arabia were actually launched from the sea. Now you can fire cruise missiles from the sea, that almost the distinction between that being launched from the land base or sea base is the same. It just gives you a much closer range. And if you're going below 100 meters, which they did, they went about 75 if you want, it's very hard to detect. You need very sophisticated, you have some of them, but next to you. But it's not that easy. So you have a lot of these problems, but we're not talking, again, going back to United States, sort of city-states, which I like that term, maybe I use it, I steal it. We're not talking about a country, we're talking about pirates. Again, somebody said, you said pirate. This is becoming a little bit of a challenge for all of us. And then there's, of course, the legal challenge. What do you do with that? Because the Iranians can hide, they have hidden behind proxies forever. I mean, they killed our Marines in Beirut. Their most successful operation, if you would. For me, it was one reason I joined the Marine Corps. But until today, nobody's paid for it. Until today. So now we have something called in the military, we use the competition conflict spectrum. It goes basically that within the sea, we have peaceful presence, show of intent, use of force, cyber, offensive cyber, violence, non-state violent conflict, state violent conflict, and total war. And if you look at we have the day-to-day all the way to lethal combat, and then within the military concept, I would say that we, collectively with Iran, have reached all of them with the exception of total war. The Iranians have peaceful presence, which is okay. They show intent of beyond peaceful presence. They use force. They have offensive cyber. They have violence. They have non-state violence. I consider the Houthis non-state. They're not state as far as I'm concerned. They have state violence. They have shot our drone. They don't deny that, but they're putting it everywhere. The only thing we don't have is total war. So when you look at that spectrum, we are in a very, anything could happen, especially an unplanned.
Are you certain that from the standpoint of Iran, they don't have total war?
State system, total war. They have a total war in their view because they believe that the United States is set to destroy the system. Yes, you're right. But total war, what I'm saying here is it's kinetically barrages of missiles going one way and coming that way. That part doesn't exist. They believe the United States has declared total war on them, not now, but forever, because the United States wants to change the regime.
So what you mean is really that from the Iranian point of view, ideologically there's a total war, but not operationally.
Exactly. Thank you. Now, and I'm coming to the end here. What is Iran's current strategies and actions? Actually comes back to you, sir. Iran talks about, after May 2018, when President Trump walked out of the GCPOA, Iran nuclear deal, whatever you want to call it, George, they had two terms that they used: resistance economy and strategic patience. That we will economically resist this, even though Iran's GDP had gone down by 62%. 62%. And secondly, that we have strategic patience basically means we wait Trump out. We're not going to do anything to provoke him. This, in my view, again, this is my views, May 2018 to June 2019, this goes out. So I'm bringing you to 2 months before. Against what? Against the US maximum pressure, which is the policy of President Trump. However, for Iranians, they're not wrong in this. It's not President Trump or Obama or Clinton. The United States policy since 1979 has been predicated on regime change. Every single one of them. If I told you that Obama sanctioned Iran more than Trump, you may think that he did. More sanctions were placed on Iran during Obama than any president in the United States. This may not be popular here, but that's the fact. Right now, Trump may actually put it more this last week. It was those sanctions, plus the Russian and Chinese not giving Iran back policy, and the Europeans coming in, that at least led to whatever it led. Today, I would say from June 2019 onwards, this is my terms, this is not Iranian terms, Iran is going into what I call the active resistance. They have decided that if they push the ante, short of what you said, sir, of total war in that sense, ideologically, but not full war, and they keep on pushing, they get more. What? First, they attacked tankers, both in May and July. These were Saudi Emirati, but also Japanese and the Norwegian. Okay, some studies have shown in the open sources, that some of these were missiles that were basically going right above the sea. These are not something that somebody would make in their backyard. This is a key. You know, this is not something that somebody in Gaza can make, although they have somebody gives them. But you have to give this technology to somebody. This is a state, again, we use the state or whatever you want to call it. This is not something, this is not a cocktail Molotov cocktail that you put those three things, which I'm not supposed to tell you, which you all know, and then lob it at somebody and then woof, people are killed. These were and they used different systems, by the way. I can tell you this much. On those 6 ships that they had, there were 4 different systems used.
All different systems.
4, not all. Now, why? If I read it because they're telling others, you know, it goes back to the old saying in American intelligence, beat the chicken, scare the monkey. If you beat the chicken, the monkey is scared. And the monkey got scared. I have a picture which I would have shown you, and I don't mean, again, please do not, since this is recorded, I do not mean the Emiratis are monkeys, so don't somebody say, look, this guy came in. UAE sent the head of their Navy, Coast Guard, not Navy, but Coast Guard to Iran, and they shook hands with the Iranians. After 2 of their ships were hit. There we go. Why? Because if you're UAE, all you want is make sure that Dubai stays the center of commerce. Dubai stays calm. They make deal with you, they make deal with everybody, but they don't want problems because they're a small country. When the Iranians did that, they said, okay, we are out. They left Yemen. They said, we're done. Europeans, again, I was born in Czechoslovakia, I love Europe. Europeans said, okay, how about $15 billion if you don't do anything? So now the Iranians are looking back and saying, wow, this is pretty good. I mean, the UAE wouldn't even recognize us. They send the general and they take pictures, and you know, I have it right here, right there, that picture. And we're here. They're dangling $15 billion in front of us and saying, okay, we give you this if you don't, you know, if you behave. You come back to the nuclear deal. And again, let's not forget that the nuclear deal was not something nice, meaning the deal itself I don't talk about. Why did we even do that? Was Iran a very nice country? No, Iran was stealing, was caught. It was being given everything. So these are things that, if you're an Iranian, you say, okay, maybe this is not a bad thing. The active resistance works. But there's one other thing. So they had hit the tankers. Then they hit the US Global Hawk. And for me, it's very key that it was done with a domestically produced surface-to-air weapon. It's called Savome Kholodat. Those of you know when they hit the Global Hawk has no weapons. It's a defenseless drone. It's huge. Its defense is what? It goes to very, very, very high altitude. Up to 40,000 feet, whatever that's, 11,000 meters, whatever it is. But they got it and when it was in full height. That's scary to me.
2 things here. First,
Yes, sir, please.
according to what I read, Global Hawk, that particular flight was at 20,000 feet.
20,000, okay.
The second, 40,000 feet is commercial altitude, and even the Bok, the one in eastern climb, the Malaysian plane, was shot down with Russian anti-aircraft missiles can do it.
So they can do it.
No problem. It's not a big
Issue.
The big thing about it was the deed itself.
The deed.
Yeah,
Okay.
itself.
Good, I stand corrected. Now, what?
By the way, if I can comment on the Gulf Coast Guard's approach to Iran, I think that this is something that's very typical of weak states that don't have the real military capability to retaliate. That they essentially have to try to bribe the attacker.
Yes.
And this has been going on since before the Middle Ages. It's been going on for many centuries. The question is, at what point will the UAE lose patience?
And what can they do if they lose patience?
Yeah, what do they do?
And
What can they do?
And at what point will they adopt an active alliance with Israel, Saudi, whoever?
See, the thing, again, I work both with UAE and Saudis as an advisor. So there's a trust issue. And we have the trust, but the attack in Saudi Arabia, the worst part of it, and again goes back to what Uzi said, is the message Iran sends is that Americans are not trustworthy anymore. That alliances with America doesn't mean your safety. Yes?
Do you mean not trustworthy or impotent? They're not quite the same thing.
No, I think
New
there's
York
no...
Times said today they're not trustworthy.
Well, I haven't read that, sir.
What does it say today?
It's not their impotence. They know we have the power.
What
They're not.
what does the New York Times say today?
That they feel America is not
Okay.
trustworthy.
I'm not quoting the New York Times, but I think it's not impotence. There is America has the potential of making Iran suffer very badly. It's this fact that our alliances, is it worthy or not, because how much you push it, how much they go. This is the out there. Look,
It's what George Kennan said.
yes, sir. Roosevelt.
It's hard to get it to move, but once it does move, it's awful.
But also, if you don't want to go by Kenan, it's amazing is why America was trustworthy, because at the time we also looked at, when you come to the Soviet Union, we looked at the Soviet Union as a direct threat to our national security. We thought the Soviet Union was a force that could destroy the United States and our way of life. So then those allies we had were part of that. The other issue is that right now in the United States, look, we are about to sell gas to Europe. It is very difficult for, whether it's a Trump or an Obama, one side to the other side, to say, look, we are going to shed American blood for oil. In that term, it's not for oil, I understand, I'm not that naive. However, in the domestic way of it, where we don't need the oil, we only import 12% of our oil from this part of the world. And even that's more political. We really don't need to. It just, the paradigm has shifted because you don't have that overarching thing. With what George Bush did, the war against terror, a lot of people say, how can you have a war against terror? It was the idea that 9/11 made it such that this is a direct threat to the United States homeland. And today, the Iranians understand that that patience and that idea is no longer there, so Iranians can play around. But the question is, my question is, how far? How far are they pushing it? Let me finish this and we should come back and talk about that. So uranium enrichment right now is at 4.5. Under the GCPOA, they should supposed to be 3.67. They're very, very clever. That makes Europeans very upset. In reality, it doesn't mean anything. I'm sure some politicians here, some politicians in America, oh, it's 4.5. It really does not mean anything. Nothing. It just makes people go weary. Because 3.6 and 4.5 technologically is nothing. They can go up to 20. It brings them a little bit, maybe a day or two closer to the D-Day, but it doesn't make anything. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make the point
Yes, sir.
that 10 or 12% enriched uranium in a 55-gallon drum with
It's a good
200 pounds of C4 in Times Square makes Manhattan gone for
That's a
100
dirty
years.
bomb, yes, sir.
They don't need a bomb, they don't need a delivery system. They just need the ability for one of those coast huggers
To get
to
there.
get to Cairo.
Or you put it on a truck.
Yes,
Or
sir.
you put it on a truck and deliver it to London and off the channel.
But that's-
So, I agree with you. They don't need 20, they don't need anything. They just need 30.
If they want to. Now, the LHU stockpile, the low enriched uranium stockpile, has surpassed from the 300 kilograms, which was under GCPOA. Pre-GCPOA, by the way, you know how much Iran had?
10 pounds, 12 pounds?
10 tons. 10 tons of LHU.
Yeah.
Now they have only 300 kilograms. Most of them are sitting in Russia. Right? Okay. The current break time is over a year right now. If Iran was totally wanted to go to, when we break out here, we mean, again, it's not the delivery system, it's not weaponization, it's just enough enriched uranium, highly enriched uranium for a bomb. It is right now about a year. Tanker seas, including a British vessel, Europeans are trying to do appeasement. Attack on Saudi oil installations. Now, what could happen more? One is that they could restart more centrifuges and higher grade centrifuges, the what so-called IR5 or 6. The second is to resume enrichment at Fordow. Why is Fordow so important? Because it is dug in about 8 meters deep into a mountain, which means that there's only one way to dismantle it. 2 ways. And you can't do it with the JDAM or any of the conventional weapons we have. So you either have to go a conventional or have somebody physically go there and take them out.
No, you can use the what you call that large bomb.
That doesn't work, so not for that. They are very clever what they made it. And I don't know who done that for them, but JDOM won't work there. It has only two, it's just two things that don't work there. One is you just go physically and take it out, or use something that nobody wants to use. Now, the last thing is talking to the US. Now I have a few theories of my own. One, some people say, I don't believe it, or, no, it's not I don't believe it, that some of the reasons for the Saudi attack was that the hardliners in Iran were trying to prevent Rouhani, the president, from speaking to Mr. Trump, who really wanted to talk to him. He kept on sending notes, hey, let's meet. No preconditions, let's meet at United Nations at the Vienna Cafe. And this way he said, okay, no more talking. The other issue is, and this is key again, the Iranian government is more fearful of its own people than Israel or the United States are combined. And the key is here because they want to make sure that they know what happened in 2009. And today in Iran, if you look at the Iranian media, and that's what I do every morning, first thing is I look at what they're going on, not just the media, but the websites. There are demonstrations, whether it's about soccer, football, or factories, car factories. And you know what the placards, most of them say? One word, referendum. Why? Because that referendum. Referendum. Because the Iranian regime said, look, we had 96% approval when we were created in 1979. The people are saying, okay, put us back in referendum and see how much approval you have. They are scared dead to that. And the fact is that Iran is a country that's proud of Cyrus the Great. Today is looking at the Arabs with what they have across, these cities that are very shiny and nice, and also that they have to line up for gasoline. The second top producer at OPEC. That people no longer feel this is America's fault or Israel's fault or Shah's fault. Shah is part of the Iranian history, one page gone. They blame that regime and they know it. And this is why the regime, in my view, the IRGC is part of the regime, as somebody said here, they're also an economic power. They don't want to lose that because for them losing this, not like, you know, so you lose it and you go and sit down and write a book to pay your mortgage. No, you lose it, your head is going to be hanging in the wall. So it's the choices are not, okay, well, sit down there and come back. No, you either die or you're on top. Because right now, the change is not going to be a nice change. They know that. And because of that, in my view, the more you keep the pressure, and the more you're making sure that there's no calmness, you have a better chance of living. The problem, again, is accidental war. Yes, sir, please.
What's the demographic breakdown in terms of population since the end of the Shah?
Okay, I have actually a very good chart for that, sir. Right now, the Iranian population is about 85 million, of which more than 66% of them are below the age of 30, which means that they have the revolution only has a history for them. And another thing which is important about revolution, take China's revolution out. I know it was big, but except the Chinese revolution, most revolutions in the world that have happened in the big cities. Of that population of 80 million plus, most of them, 79-point-something% of them live in 4 cities. So you have mega cities, which is ripe for blow up. And the other question is, this goes back to the question somebody asked about the two military. Why the Navy is the only one that they're integrating? Because the Navy is not on land. When it comes to land forces, they still do not trust the regular forces. Because they don't know if something happens on the streets. Would they, exactly like the time of Shah? Why the Shah was ousted? Because the Iranian military refused to shoot at their own people. Whether this military will shoot or not, that's why they have the Basij, that they will shoot you. Because the Basij also knows that for them it's not going to be a very good time if regime changes. And then again, I have a picture here for you from Kaihan, which is Iran's the most right-wing paper. It says a picture of the Iranian, the British ship, and it says, Nafkashta, tanker for tanker, Iran acts on promise, on its promise. To other people say, well, the British were violating some stupid thing they say. But for the old people say, look, the British took our ship, then we took their ship. And guess what? The British released their ship, and this ship is still sitting there. Yeah. And nothing is happening. They took their oil, by the way. They took it in their reserves, and they have put an Iranian flag right on top of the ship. When you do that, I am a historian too also, a lot of you are historians. With a regime like that, I don't know. Here's and this is my last thing before I do. This is the prayer leader of Mashhad. That's a very important job. If anybody wants to know why this is so important, then I'll tell you why prayer leader of Mashhad means. Being against the world arrogance, that's the United States and maybe you guys do, is not limited to saying death to America. That's just a slogan. Being against world arrogance means not becoming Western oriented, which means what? Western orientation means this regime falls. Not by force, but by Iranian people too. And not to live basely like in the West. It means not riveting our eyes to the West. All this means they have understood Iran rules in the region. Being against world arrogance is the principle of our revolution, and we will not set it aside. That's the key. Yes, ma'am.
I was interested to hear, what does the Western world, or the parts of the West that want to go back and have Trump go right back into the agreement, what do they expect to happen? Nothing happened now, at the end of the period of time, and if we live with that agreement. Do you expect that the Mashiach, the salvation will come?
No, I think they're not that. I have to, full disclosure, I was part of a former negotiation for 10 years with the Iranians, sitting at tables just like this. The idea was, this one, it was a, people understood that there were problems with the missiles. There's not a word mentioned about missiles. Nor weaponization, because even if you, let's say on this table we have 50 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, what do you do with that? I get your point, sir. Dirty bomb, yes. But if you don't do dirty bomb, if you want to have a nuclear weapon, that's not a weapon. You have to weaponize it. Again, in front of him, I don't want to say these things. And also you have to deliver it, because you cannot deliver it on a sharp tree, because it's an oops moment if it falls on Syria or somewhere else. So you need to make sure that you have a delivery system that is accurate. The idea was to give time, either for a revolution, or basically, yes, it was kicking the can down the road. It buys us some time. By that time, we see what we could do with Iran. Or maybe Iran will actually become, a lot of people were mesmerized by Rouhani. You know, he speaks English, he studied in the UK. Mr. Zarif is a PhD from the University of Denver. They're like, you know, nicer, more easily to deal with. And it wasn't naivete. It was that a lot of people thought, and also, look, for Europeans, and I understand part of their views too. For you, trends are very different. How many Shias have blown up a cafe or killed people or rabbed anybody in Europe? Zero. Zero. This is something that a lot of people in this part of the world don't get. Europeans, what are their biggest problems? There are countries with nuclear weapons around them, Russia, breathing down their neck. However, their biggest problem is refugees. How many of them are Iranian? Very few. If they are, they're actually usually very intellectual. You know, they can do jobs. How many Shias have blown up the Europeans? Zero. They don't see the problem in Iran, they see the problem in Saudi Arabia. They see the problem in the Sheikhdoms. Therefore, they really are reluctant. It is a fact. Your politicians and our politicians don't get that. They say, look guys, they're not killing our people. If they come here as refugees, they'll usually go up in this ladder. So if we want a strategy to get Europeans on board, you have to address that. If not, nobody's going to listen to it. Because in their view, and I have to tell you, they're not totally off. They see Sunni militancy as a problem for Europe, not Shia militancy. So they say, the Iranians, you know what, we can handle them. We have 15 years, we see what happens in 15 years. Maybe Khamenei dies, and maybe we get lucky and we get somebody who's a little bit more a little bit more hostile. Yeah, a lady in the back, please.
Okay, so I always listen to what's in it for me, you know, when you say this. As an Israeli and an American, we have a cruise on a regular ship line scheduled for February that goes from Singapore to Abu Dhabi. So through Oman, through the Arabian Sea, through whatever, with situations changing as quickly as this is happening right now, I'm listening to you and I'm going, man, are we stupid?
By law, I can't tell you anything. Talk to the State Department; they will tell you.
No, I know. You can't tell me, but I'm saying, what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that
It's dangerous.
it could be more acts of semi-state, I don't know how to put it,
I like that
piracy
word.
are beginning to happen, and would independent vessel like Celebrity Cruise Lines be a likely target?
Okay, what is happening, ma'am, is first of all, as I said, there is what we call terrorism in the sea. They are, even Al-Qaeda. We did publish something just recently. We discovered some manuals on again, whatever I say here is all above the ground. Somebody translated them, and we published parts of it. They're looking now at sea as a place to wage war. So far, the Iranians have not targeted any civil, well, they have targeted vessels, which are civilian, commercial, but they haven't killed anybody. And they released some of the people that they have kept, the other ones who've kept. All we know is that the crew of the British vessel, some they released, some that they have kept, they are and they have been met, and they are not abused in any which way. I mean, they are abused, they're prisoners, but beyond that, they're not killing them or torturing them, they're actually feeding them and all that stuff. Yeah, the British, but they haven't targeted. I personally don't think, again, this is not something easy to say, that Iranians would actually target a commercial ship right now. They're not that desperate yet. They have a lot. Al-Qaeda or somebody, whatever, you fill the name there. Well, they hit the World Trade Center, so for them it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just telling you.
Do they have sea power?
They're working on it. They're working on it. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to go back to what you said about the people, that to get rid of the mullahs through revolution of the people. Do you think that Trump is doing the right thing then with all his sanctions to make the people suffer? Will they think death to America, or will they look at the mullahs and say they're the ones who are causing it?
That's $1 million question, ma'am, because the idea is that what I said before is that I think that like now the system is break it or fix it is in the hands of the regime, not us. The Iranians, by and large, are they like the United States more than most countries in this region, Israel and India being an exception. I'm absolutely sure about that. If there was a open referendum, the Iranians are more, I don't say pro-American, meaning that they become our stooges, but looking more towards the US than a lot of countries that we call allies. That's a fact. Are they going against us because they think we are doing all of this? I don't think so right now. The question, one of the hopes, and again, one of the hopes in the policies, both of Obama and Mr. Trump, is that this regime falls on its own weight. That the regime shoots itself in the foot. That is the hope. Why? Because if that happens, you actually get a solid ally in that part of the world. This is a big risk because the other side knows that. This is the key. The other side, meaning that it's just not the Arab GC. There's a whole mafia of people who have billions of dollars in their heads and lives and everything involved in that. And they see that the United States, as Khamenei called this velvet glove. Obama and now Mr. Trump. A lot of people say, no, Mr. Trump should have hit something when the global hawk was hit. And he didn't. And his rationale was very interesting. No American lives were lost, and it would have been disproportionate, his words. If you're the Iranian person, you say, well, this guy actually cares about us.
Yes, and that's important.
And the regime just goes nuts over that, saying, wow. They read more of us than a lot of our people in the US read less about us than the Iranians do. Because they're obsessed. There's an obsession almost. So, but this is the key. The key is, as I said, yes, buying time, but the question is, now they hit Saudi Arabia. This is the biggest attack. Do we have a proof, a undeniable proof Iran did it? No, we will never have. The same as Khobar. I think Khobar was Iran. I have no doubt about it. Do I know it for a fact? No. But this is the most egregious attack on the world energy supply than going back to when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. There's nothing before that. And again, so far, the reaction has been pretty mute. Pretty mute. The Saudis are taking off of their reserve oils. They're keeping the oil okay, so people are just kind of like, hey, this may not work out. Partially because I'm not blaming Europeans or anybody else. Nobody's going to step up to the, what other options are there? I mean, I'm on record, actually, I was talking in Mesa in 2003, a month before the invasion of, US invasion of Kuwait, of Iraq. And then actually made it the Jerusalem Post. For this, I actually looked at that. I remember as I was going out, somebody told me at Ben Gurion, why are you here? I showed them the Jerusalem Post and this. I said it then, I said the main beneficiary of that would be Israel. But I had always stated that, and I still state it was one of the greatest strategic, and I've said it in public, so I don't care about this, greatest strategic mistakes of the United States, I would say ever. But at that time, believe it or not, here they will support, in America they will support, Mrs. Clinton supported
The
it.
support here was public, not real. Anybody who understood things was strongly against the American invasion of Iraq.
Let's put it this way. Israel had argued for many years that Iran was the real challenge, not Iraq. And it was very clear. All the messages from Jerusalem to Washington were, you're focused on the wrong target.
And we did it, and we basically gave, there was a balance. It wasn't pretty, but it was a balance.
We let the monster loose.
And then we gave Iraq basically boom right into their hands. So right now, there's no appetite anywhere. And we're alone. We don't, even, I'm not saying it's good or bad to escort ships. We have 4 countries that have joined this. 4. Australia, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. Britain now just joined. Why they joined? Because their ship is taken. And again.
By the way, a comment about the British ship being taken. One thing that people don't realize, the Iranians have a very long memory, like everybody else in the Middle East. Right? In 1848, Britain killed 8 million persons.
8 million.
8 million.
8 million what?
Persons.
How did they do that?
Really?
They engineered a famine.
What?
Family? Yeah, I don't know.
Never heard about it.
8 million. I have 2 questions, if I may ask.
Yes, sir, please.
One deals with the ethnic minorities in Iran, Kurds and Arabs and so on. Are they a threat to the regime? That's my first question. And my second question is, how come Turkey and Iran are such good friends when they ought to be at each other's throat?
Okay. First of all, the ethnic, I know there are people, your country and some other countries working on that. Iran is a very solid country. The minorities have problems, yes. The Baluch are very small. They are all the way from the southeastern part. They're a small minority, separated with a long desert. Yes, they kill some Iranians here and there, Pakistan, Saudis, whatever. They're never a threat to Iranian state. The largest minority are the Turks, the Azeris. If I told you that Khamenei is an Azeri, he actually speaks Azeri at home, so they're very integrated. They are not, the Kurds were always an issue, but right now the Iranians are turning the Kurds into an ally, partially. And what would actually lead me to your system? The Arabs, Today, the head of the used to be the defense minister, now is the head of the supreme leader's office for military affairs, or whatever they call it, is Shamkhani, who's an Arab. So they're trying to integrate.
Shamkhani is Arab?
Of course, he's 100% Arab. He actually speaks. Why do you think they keep sending to Saudi Arabia and everywhere? Because he speaks Arabic too. Shamkhani is from Khuzestan. So they try to integrate. I don't think Iran's demise, if people are looking that they're going to be an Azari uprising, that ain't going to happen. This country, and this is to their credit, they have made, they're like France. See, Spain has issues with the Basque here, the Catalonia. The Iranians, through the language unification, through national unification, have made this country as one. Yes, the Persians would, I said this, but right now the top man who, is ruling for God, in their view, he's actually an Azari. The question about Turkey, look, I don't think they're strategic allies. They started a process just last week. The Iranians, the Turks right now are petrified of what's happening in Idlib province. For Erdogan, this is an incredible defeat. And guess who's doing it? It's the Iranians. The Russians are doing it, Russian bombing, that the Iranians are doing it.
The Turkish defeat?
Idlib, the province next to Latakia, north of Latakia, and next to Iskenderun. And the Iranians today, where they agree so far is the idea that if there is a change, the Iranians may not empower the Kurds in the north. For the Turks, of course, that's the key. Number one is the Kurdish issue. As long as the Kurds are, and this is why the United States and Turkey are not having the biggest problem. If we take the Turkish problem out, everything else is going to be solvable. That's one place for the Turks is not solvable. So they have it's more transactional than strategic. History, you said history, so history prevents them to become a strategic allies. Transactional what? Turkey smuggles Iranian oil. Turkey refused to accept the American sanctions. Turkey needs cheap oil. Iran gives them cheap oil directly and also smuggle. If you look at the border between Iran and Turkey, there's a line of trucks. You just use Google Maps. You don't need to have anything intelligence. There's a line of trucks that's just standing. So they keep on getting this very cheap oil. Also, Turkey for Iran is Turkish money goes into Iran and becomes gold, and the Iranians need gold because their currency is going down the drain. But it is all like that. I don't think it is something for the future to be as two strategic partners. Like now, they're both being sanctioned. They're both having issues. They both have an ally in Russia, but neither one trusts Russia fully. Neither Russia trusts either one of them. So it is as I said, it's a transactional system that works between the both of them. And if either one finds a situation where that transaction is no longer beneficial, they go back not to animosity. They haven't fought a war since 1729, but back to just coexistence. I don't think they're going to be together. And another thing that I just want to say about the Eastern Mediterranean, when you look at Eastern Mediterranean right now, of course you have Cyprus, Greece, and Israel, you have Egypt, then you have this new Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum that the US is very supportive, which again, your country, Cyprus, Egypt, Italy, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority is involved. Everybody talks about the northern tier states, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey. In Turkey's drilling and off of Cyprus, I'm going to hear that a lot when I go to Cyprus, and that's an obvious issue. I am also thinking, nobody talks almost, you never hear about the Iranians, maybe here in this country you would because you have a direct threat for that. The Iranians have been trying, as I said, they're trying to go all the way around Africa to get a foothold in Syria, but it's not just Syria, it's also Lebanon. The more and more Hezbollah becomes whatever they are, again, what's Hezbollah? Whatever you know they call it. I'm pointing to you, sir, because I'm about to steal your little thing here, maybe.
Just mention me a couple of times.
So what are you going to do with them? If the Iranians get a foothold somehow, they have a foothold already, they're sitting a lot of oil.
Why not Cuba?
They try.
Why to refuse?
Venezuela.
Cuba is too far away. So I ended that one. I had a picture for you, just I wrote it, I think I wrote. See, that's how I find myself. This is USS Halley, is true, but not far from your shores right now. Not like now, though, but last year. So I leave here, I know we had a question and answer, but if you have any specific things beyond that or around it, please go ahead and, yes, sir.
I'm going to bring this to a formal end now, and Dr. Tarzi will hopefully have a couple of minutes to continue dialoguing with you on an individual basis. And thank you, Amin, for joining us. And thank you all for coming out tonight.